The acceptance of foreigners is well documented in post-exilic Judaism, despite Ezra's polemical efforts to exclude foreigners from the community. It's important to remember that Ezra's reforms never became normative for the entire community. Post-exilic and later rabbinic Judaism never adopted the purely genealogical definition of Jewish identity. They allowed for the phenomenon of conversion and marriage into the covenant by persons of foreign birth who accepted the God of Israel, a possibility that Ezra completely forecloses. Ezra's extreme views were popular among sectarian groups. So Ezran exclusivism is championed, for example, in writings that are found at Qumran. It exerted some influence on early Christian bans on marriage, absolute bans on marriage between believers and unbelievers. But it's the Book of Ruth that features prominently in the Jewish conversion ceremony to this day. You have a different kind of acceptance of foreigners that's voiced by prophets of the Restoration period. So these are prophets, 5th century, and we'll look late 6th and 5th century. We're going to look now briefly at some of the last prophetic books. And these are writings that date to the time of the first generations of returned exiles and on. Earlier prophets in the pre-exilic period, right, the classical prophets we've already looked at, they had spoken of a remnant that would be restored and would be restored gloriously to its land. But the returned exiles faced a life of great hardship, the reality of poverty and the difficulties in rebuilding the temple and the hostility of the Judeans who had remained behind, as well as the hostility of the surrounding peoples, the absence of any real political independence under a Davidic king. All of these things fell far short of the early prophets' glorious descriptions of this restored remnant. And so new prophets in the period of the Restoration have to address the community's disappointment. And the short book of Haggai contains the words of the prophet Haggai, spoken primarily to Zerubbabel. Zerubbabel is the governor of Judea. And Haggai prophesies around 520. And he declares that all of the difficulties the community was facing, the agricultural setbacks and the famines, these were all signs of God's displeasure that the temple hadn't been completed. And Zerubbabel is convinced by this. The people return to their task enthusiastically, and as we know, the temple is rebuilt as Haggai promised. He says it's a humble structure, but soon it's going to be filled with treasures flowing in from all nations. And the promises of the restoration that were made by the prophets of old are just around the corner. So Haggai longed for a rebuilt temple, but not only that, also for the reestablishment of Judah's independence under a Davidic king. And he held out hope for Zerubbabel, the governor, who was, after all, a descendant of David through the last king that went into exile. He hoped that he would serve as God's Messiah or appointed king. That hope is even stronger in the work of Haggai's contemporary, the prophet Zechariah.